Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Low Code Café series. Today, the main theme is new features, upcoming features in the 1.14 release. But for those of you that are new to this event, know that it's a weekly event that we are doing for our team and our community and our customers. We bring everyone together, and it's going over technical aspects, tickets that we identify in our community forum that raise some interest in discussing them at the community level. We also showcase new features, upcoming features like we are going to do today. And also most of the content is related to actually building something with Plant and App. So we've seen various systems in the past. We've seen security controls being implemented. We see specific systems like marketing systems, changelog systems, and so on. So it's a lot of good examples and a lot of know-how in this series. So this is already episode 46. So you have 45 hours of recordings that are available on our YouTube channel. And Dale, our head of support that will follow soon, he's doing a very good job at bookmarking these videos, so it's very easy to navigate through them. Speaking of which, we usually have an agenda for every week, which covers stories from the trenches, so from our support channels with Dale, our head of support. And today we'll be discussing with Reza, Garrow, our head of product, about the upcoming features in 1.14 that should be coming up very soon. And I'm looking forward to see them as well. So without further ado, let's pass it to Dale and hear what's cool happening on the community channels.
Hello, good morning. So today we're going to talk about a few things that are coming in this 1.14 release, and these are things that came through the support channel, either from client requests or in responding to help desk tickets. And so I just picked a couple of cool ones that are coming out that we can talk about. So the first is automation mail triggers that are enhanced to have additional mail headers. And we'll demonstrate that and why that's important. And then two new actions have been added, export module and import module. And I think this is the first time I've used red on my screen here, but the import module is one of those things you need to understand and use with caution. So let's back up here and let's get out of that. I'm already trying to pass it to Reza here. So let's talk first about mail headers. If we were to do a new email, I'm going to send it to myself. And send it like that. So when we send it, there are a lot of headers that get added, and in Google you can see them with show original, and there's it'll show the original message with all the extra content with it. And so, for example, we see a message ID that says, it's a very big, long, complex message ID. It really depends on where it originates from. When it's Gmail, it looks something like this. But if it were Outlook or any other sender, it would look slightly different. But it's, as far as I know, it's guaranteed to be unique. So that's original message. If we were to reply to that, we'll get some additional headers. So send that and let Google work on it. So if we were to look at the original message for that reply, maybe let's see. Yeah, so now if we get down in here, there's some things, there's references and in reply to, as well as a message ID. And so those are additional headers that are in the mail and that we were not previously available to us through bringing in our mail action in our mail trigger. So that's what we're going to take a look at. So this appears, if we go into automation, I've got a job going on that's called email headers, and we'll edit that. And this is the trigger that I'm talking about. So previously, the headers that are showing here in red were all available to you when the trigger fired. SMTP is similar, but this happens to be the one for IMAP. And so as a result of this trigger, every time a mail gets received, for example, you had the availability of mail from and the from name mail to and the to names, things like that. But the message ID and the in reply to and the ones we were just showing you were not available to us. So the development team in 1.14 has added select additional mail headers, and any headers that you want to call out and try to return, it will return. So I'm now getting the message ID, the references, the in reply to, and I've added, let's see, I've added some things that are a little bit confusing because I didn't do that right. So let me remove that. But we're getting the content type and the in reply to. And then I follow this up with a log event action where I'm just outputting that same content into the log. So let's take a look at the logs. I'm going to refresh, and so I had sent 2 emails, and so we'll take a look at the first one. And so this LCC 46 test that I sent, this is the one that had a code that ended in ED1W. So we now are able to get the message ID, and if we look at the next one, we can see that it was in reply to ED61W, and it has a different message ID. So these headers now allow us to identify the message and the thread, and the purpose of this, one of the reasons that we added this, one of the important reasons to have access to these headers is if you're trying to figure out what messages relate to which. So while you have access to these standard headers, message ID and reply to references, there's all the other headers that are part of that. Any header that you see in your email, you can now extract and process. So hopefully that'll give extra tools to allow handling of emails. The next one that I wanted to talk about is the export and import actions. And this is, I think I'm going to show you the impact of this first, and then we can show you exactly what they look like. They're very easy and really, really simple, but powerful. So I have a form here called, a page called import module, and I'm just going to refresh it, make sure that we're live here. And I'm going to edit this page. So what I have here is a page that says that we have a tab that says contact us, users that says a users tab. And if we were to edit these things, you can see that they are this module is a HTML module. So it's a text HTML module, and it happens to be module ID 576. So let's cancel out of that. The thing that I'm going to demonstrate, if we go back to automation, I have a couple of jobs here, and I have one that is that exports modules from one page and imports them to another, and I'm just going to run this. So if we come here and run it and go back to our page, if we now refresh, let's see, the magic has happened. So now this module inside here is a form, and if we go over to users now, it's a grid. And what's happened is that I have a source page called in my case, it's called export module, and I have a grid defined here and a form defined here. And so what we're doing is doing an export from these and importing it to another page. So here's the power and the reason. There are some users that develop content that goes in a lot of different places within their site, or more specifically, people who have other sites. So you have a master site designed with modules that are pre-developed, and you want to be able to push those to your client sites. So maybe you have an application that you have a lot of different clients for. So this capability would allow you to say, well, I'm going to take this module and I'm going to push it to my client, or the other way around. The client, it could be set up so that it could update and get the current version of software from your master site. So just demonstrating this a little bit, if you'll notice, we have user ID, first name, last name, and on our import page, same thing, user ID, first name, last name. If we go ahead and make a change to this grid, so that's the user grid, and I'm just going to rearrange columns. I'm going to move user ID to the end and save and refresh. So we'll see user ID move to the end. We haven't exported yet, so if we refresh this page here, this one still has the original version. When we run the synchronization again, and again, just a second, I'll show you what's going on behind the scenes, but we run the synchronization again and now refresh, they get the current version of this grid, and so the user ID moves. So let's take a quick look at what's behind the scenes. This was implemented by APIs, and I'm planning to do a feature focus on this so that we can so that you can see exactly the setup and know exactly how to configure these. But the module actions are pretty simple. I've made an API that says move it from this module to that module. Here's the new actions. We have export module that says export it from whatever module ID number, and module content output token. It just takes the export of this thing and puts it into a token. And this is the same export that if you were to use the settings, the core.NET new right-click to export content, that's the exact same mechanism. So we're just using the same mechanism that .NET Nuke has. And so that puts it into a token. The import module is similarly simple. So you have a module ID, where do you want this thing to go? And so it's going to a module number, and then you take this same module content and send it to it. So we've put in an appropriate warning here, and you should read through it, but we're giving you a powerful tool, and then you're responsible for, with great power comes great responsibility. Whatever module number that you give to it, if that module exists, it's going to get overwritten with this content. And as you saw in my first demonstration, we converted an HTML module that was a placeholder to a action form or an action grid. If you get the numbers wrong, you're going to mess up your site. So it's really important, but it's for you to get that right. But it's a control for you to manage. And with this now, you'll be able to. There's several things it opens up. The export is very safe to do because it just takes the content from whatever module you specify and drops it into a token, which you can do anything with. So one thing this opens up is the possibility that you can back up your work. You could have an automation job that backs up your work and stores it somewhere. Grab your whole site and take all the HTML, all the configuration, not just limited to our modules, and stores them in files or stores them in a zip, whatever you want to do. So export, very safe. And then on the import side, whether you want to import that into your current site or make through APIs, make a distribution mechanism so that your clients or sub-sites get that content, import module will do that. It's just your responsibility to keep up with the module numbers. Okay, so that is the two new features that I picked out. And with that, I'm going to ask Reza to step up, and we will let him share and tell about the other new features in 1.14.
Thanks, Dale. Hey, everyone. Got a bunch of cool stuff to show you today. So Going to kind of not walk through the whole release roadmap here. We still kind of underway and bringing home a couple of extra goodies. A lot of work going in on date time and kind of standardizing and making that a smoother experience. That's still ongoing a little bit, and trying to put the finishing touches on the ability to execute a workflow as a token. And so hopefully here in maybe in a week or two, when things completely are rolled out and available, I'll save those for showing that day. But in the meantime, have a lot of stuff that's coming in, and I've kind of picked several of these that I think you all will find kind of useful and exciting. So what I did here was just set us up a little demo application, if you will. It's just like a task tracker, but it's going to exercise several of the things I want to demo today. And I want to show you about 5 different things. We've got the namespaces or grouping for entities and workflows. I'm going to show you how that works. We've got a new feature on the dashboards tiles where they will now refresh for you on an interval, and we'll see how to set that up and how that looks. A few weeks ago, I think Radu demoed how to connect with Google and Google Sheets in particular. And that was a bit just purely through APIs, but it wasn't very secure. And so we have a new connector type that is for Google authentication, and being able to get a token from Google, generate one, and much kind of more securely and conveniently grab this token and be able to pass it in and get access to read and update Google Sheets or pretty much anything that would be accessible under Google. So if there was docs or presentations or sites or any of the kind of apps that Google gives you, but in particular here, what I have set up is for Sheets. I want to show this PowerShell action. This is an action that has been around for a while, but only available through the scheduler. And it has a lot of power to it and a lot of neat things you can do. And so what we've done is kind of liberate or free it from being trapped inside the scheduler. And I'm going to show how to use it, for example, in workflows today, and get some interesting information off of the server that's running. But you can use this to orchestrate and do a lot of powerful things. So kind of like Dale's red text that he had before, I would say use with caution. This one's a very powerful one. And then lastly, with Page Builder, we've kind of made it a little bit easier and more convenient to manage styling and customizing the look and feel of your application, and I'll show that. So kind of without further ado, I want to show you the namespaces. And so I'm gonna, in my little task builder here, we've got something that says we've got this in progress now. And but before I jump into namespaces, you'll notice that normally the tiles don't refresh. You have to refresh your page. So there is actions and things to cause a grid to refresh after I've taken action on data. But what you may have not noticed was that I now have one item in progress. And so before we jump into namespaces, I want to show you how that's happening. And there's 2 ways or things that you can do to set this. The first one, and this is kind of a new thing. So dashboards, you have in Page Builder these settings and different things that you can pull in for the various features and modules that you have on a page. So if I had said, like, I want to work with my form, I hit it, it slides it in. We all know this, but when I would hit dashboard, nothing would happen before. It didn't really have a proper interface. So in order to give this new feature, it's kind of the first thing that we've done is you'll notice there used to be a templates button that was kind of oddly out of place underneath the module. So now you can access your templates here, but you'll notice also you can change the title of the dashboard tiles if you wanted to, so manage the name of it, but you also have a refresh rate, and this is in seconds. And so I can say I want this to refresh, let's say every 5 seconds, And then if I refresh my page, what we'll notice now is that, let's say, since I'm demoing dashboard here, I'm going to mark this one to in progress as well. And if we wait a few seconds, you should see that now my new count has decreased and my in progress count has updated. Now, let's say there's certain ones that I want to have run at a different frequency. So maybe, and where this is really, I mean, it started out, and what inspired this feature was a customer who said, hey, look, I've got big screens up all over our office, and we've got this integrated with our data warehouse and things, and we are pulling in a lot of different data. So we have just a big screen full of these tiles, and he was using Microsoft Power BI at the time to do all of this. So expensive, a lot of work, a lot of expertise. And he's like, and in the end, I realized, even though Power BI can do all of these things, all we were really using it for was to get these KPIs and to get these tiles. And so, hey, great, you have this dashboard. I want this. How can I get it to refresh on an interval? And so that's really where that feature was inspired from, and why you would want to set the refresh interval holistically, right? And so if you have, you could do your layout, if you were doing a full screen, a couple of different ways, right? I could add several of these modules onto a page and maybe say, here's system monitoring, errors, that sort of thing, and I'm pointing it to my logs, and maybe I'm able to look at my resource utilization and stuff, and we'll say, well, how could we do that? I want to see if my CPU is overloaded, if my server memory is out of whack, and that's where that PowerShell one's going to come in handy here in a second. But I could do multiple dashboards and have each row represent a different area of what I want to monitor or visualize, and I could set different refresh intervals. Some things maybe don't change that often, every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. So each one can have its own interval. Or I could come and just make a new template. And I could, call it 5 rows or something like that. But we'll keep it simple and just call it 2 rows for now, but you'll get the idea.
Reza, when you
Yes.
get a minute, could you magnify your screen a little bit? It's a little hard to see.
Absolutely.
Thanks, sir.
Better?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. And so, as we've seen in the past, never hurts to see it again, I have the ability to configure how my cards are going to look, and the only thing that really needs to be unique to them is the IDs. And so if I said I have this template and I select it now, oops. Probably need to do it from a new setting. And so now I have 2 rows of cards, right? But these are all going to honor that 10-second refresh interval. And so if I wanted to stagger them, I could add multiple instances of the dashboard of the tiles and put them on different intervals. So things that don't change that frequently versus things that do. Now, that was what inspired this, but in kind of testing and making use of it, realized that this is also super handy. Kind of going to go back here to our template for just the cases where you actually have a page and you've just kind of going with the out of the box, or you've got a simple set of tiles that are related to the data that you're working with, like this case here, where I want to kind of take a look at, I've got a total of 5 things to do, and 3 of them are new and 2 of them are in progress. The other thing I kind of want to show here is that I can override, even though the overall interval was 5 seconds. Maybe we make this 30 seconds. I also have the ability to override at the individual tile level. So we'll make this one 2 seconds, just for the sake of argument here. And let me put this one back into not started. And now you notice that changed instantly, right? But then this one had a staggered delay. So now I'm going to mark this demo dashboard to be in progress again. And you'll see that hits right away. And a few seconds later, this one hits. So both refresh intervals are running. And that's my story there. Basically, you have the ability to set refreshes, and you can do them overall at the overall feature, the level of all of them, or you can come in and specify them individually, and they will work together in harmony. All of them will. I would be careful if you have 100 of these tiles and you've got to manage all of this. So be wise in how many of these you override and how frequently you're refreshing. As you can see, when there's not a lot of data involved, not tens of thousands, this all happens very fast and nothing in your average app on your average page to worry about. But kind of keep an eye on it. And if you see that it's taking some time to load or your performance on your page is slowing down, adjust those. So I'm going to call this one done. And just in the spirit of everything, you'll see that that hit right away and kind of came along a few seconds later is that the completion now has been updated. So this is super handy though, and you can see why I would highly recommend putting some sort of a 5-10 seconds, whatever you think is appropriate, few seconds, just depends on how heavily your page is used and how much data you have. But you can now, as you're working with your data, especially if you're visualizing things that have to do with the data below here, then users will be able to get that feedback and not have to refresh the page. So now let's jump in. Yes.
Yep. Before you move on, there was a question. If you've made individual changes, can you reset them to be the default, or now once you make an individual change, does that to one tile, does that now have to be, how do you get it back to being the default value?
So you just clear it out. And so part of me showing this, and I'm showing some of this stuff a little bit early, this is all still in development, right? And we're getting close to having a release candidate probably. So I know I've got some folks that volunteer and help out with testing, but I wanted to show this and if you guys are seeing this and you have some ideas or think like, wow, that's confusing, or, great time to get some feedback. And this is optional here. That was one thing I noticed when working with it, is it's very, very predominant, right? And so thinking about putting like a little optional tag on there so no one's confused that this is a kind of override is what this really should be called. But you just
clear it out and it's good to go.
That's it, and you're good to go.
You
don't even need to put you could put a 0 in, but nothing equals 0. So, okay, so that's that one. Now let's hop into our configuration and see kind of the big feature. I think this was the big achievement of this release. And you'll see here, I have workflows and entities both have a new column, a new item, and it's called Namespaces. And I've talked a lot about this one in the weeks leading up to it, and that as you build, you get so many of these workflows or entities. And I've always felt that it's one thing when I make a little app in half an hour to demo to you all, and you can see how quickly you can accumulate things. As you're really building in the real world and making use of this stuff, these things can number 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of these, right? Especially as your app's been around a while, and it gets kind of hard to find them. And so this idea first introduced in tokens, where you have namespaces, and it's a way to group things. So we've introduced them now into workflows and entities, and you can see that my little app here, that's a task manager, I've created a few different namespaces. So one of them that I can filter by these is tracker. Tracker is the meat of what this app is. It's a little task manager, right? And so I have a couple of workflows that are related to this. One is to read things in from a Google Sheet. We'll see that in a second. The other is to update the status, and that was just what you were seeing when I would push the little button on the grid and it was changing the status. I was making use of a workflow so that I could just pass in the status I want and things update and refresh. Those are the only two real functional workflows that have to do with my application. You're saying, so what's all the rest of this stuff? So the things like, and I've talked about, and I'm just kind of gave a few examples. One is things that I name this one utilities. It's things that are handy and reusable and almost like functions, right? And I can use them anywhere. I could use them in my app, or maybe I've got this tracker is a task management is one thing that this does. Maybe another one that this same application can do is publishing out, a list of changes or something like that. So I might have a totally different space, like we did the Remember Me a couple of weeks ago, right? And maybe I want to build that Remember Me functionality in it. And if you remember, that had about 10 workflows in it that were only used for that feature of the system, right? So I could make a Remember Me namespace and put those under there. Then I went and I made one that maybe isn't so much just utilities. We're doing a little bit of heavy hitter stuff in this one. And so I decided like I would have another namespace called administration. And we'll take a look at these in a second, but these are some PowerShells that are able to go out and look at my resource utilization, what services are running on the server. For example, maybe I have a keep alive workflow that's running to keep my site kind of fresh. There is a page, I create this one kind of often on sites. Sometimes if you haven't accessed an app or something in a while, it takes it a minute the first time it spins up. Well, you can have a keep alive that you hit. It's a certain API call you make, and it just keeps your site kind of spun up and cached and everything fast. So you can make such a workflow and then put it in automation and have that scheduled to run. That's like an administrative type task or workflow, right? And in general, when I'm working with my application, I don't want to have to wade through that or view that. So how this works, you get the idea of how you would separate these and ways that you can use them, and then you can filter and search on them. When you create a new workflow, the first thing that you'll see is that it's going to ask you now to assign or edit a namespace. And so if I want to pick one, I have the list of availables. Default is what everything, the system ships with default. You can't mess with that one. You can't change it. So part of the reason for that is when you all get this update, you're now going to have namespaces. And so rather than have them be empty, they're all going to be listed in default. And so you can then move them to create your own and move them. When you create a new workflow, you have the option to select an existing one, or you could say new, and we can, call this, let's just say functions. And these are workflows that take in data and manipulate, or something, do a calculation and return a result. So you save that, and now it's picked and it's ready to go. Now, one of the things, and with agile development is that want to get you value quicker and have like kind of that MVP, that minimal viable valuable product, if you will, right? I've got some value to deliver. I think one of the next things we're going to want is a proper place in App Builder where you will see the namespaces listed, the descriptions, you can edit, rename them, that sort of stuff. But for now, you can do it from just within one of your workflows or entities. So it's kind of built in here, right? If I wanted to edit this one, I just pick one that has, for example, functions, and I want to call it function. And now that's what it's called, and I select it, and you'll see up here in my workflow, whatever namespace is utilized is there. If I hit the little pencil by it, I get this same kind of namespace manager, right? So currently it's targeted at the thing you're working on, but you can do some overall management, editing, creating new ones, deleting them. If you want it gone, if you delete one, it'll take everything that was under there and just put them all in default, and then you can reassign them. So be mindful and careful with delete. But it's, again, not going to delete any of your workflows or anything like that. Currently, these namespaces really don't do anything other than, at the moment, just give you a handy way to sort, filter, and get access to things. These are shared between namespaces, are shared between entities and workflows. We will bring into the fold the tokens as well. So these will be universal. And you can still, I have things like that only makes sense maybe for entities to be called, and workflows aren't going to use them or tokens aren't going to use them. No big deal, don't use them there. But in general, what you're seeing the trend now is that if my entities and my tokens and my workflows, three major areas where I'm doing that are driving my application, and if I'm able to have namespaces on them, what I'm foreseeing with this is having the ability to do searches or different things to say, hey, just show me my whole world that has to do with the tracker. I'm willing to bet that you can probably, and I haven't played with this yet, but I'm betting that there's some searches that could be set up. And you could even create yourself a custom search that says, just show me everything that has to do with this namespace. And you can say, oh, okay, here, there's a couple of entities, there's a few workflows, there's a few tokens. But what we can start doing is kind of bringing and targeting your development experience to these namespaces so that you can kind of cut out all the noise and not hunt and peck for things so much. If this pattern keeps holding true and we get good feedback, I could see us putting this into APIs as well. And maybe as we are moving forward into the ability to import applications and export certain functionality out and things, you'll be able, like you can here in tokens, I don't have any in this, but I could export when you export tokens and it lists them, you can just pick a namespace and say, give me everything. So there's one handy place I see this going in the future, like when we talk about these mini apps and us being able to share and put things in a marketplace, is if you build your things using these namespaces, we can kind of extract out everything that's in this namespace or namespaces. So hey, my utilities and the tracker namespace is where this whole app is all grouped under. And then when other people import that in, they'll have them grouped under these namespaces and things like that as well. So as we're injecting things into applications, they're not just getting muddied. You might be able to also come and say, hey, you know what? I imported this application or something, don't need it, don't want it, wasn't for me. Delete everything that has to do with this namespace. So right now, the value is you get to organize things and work with things kind of cleaner and easier. But know that I think this is going to be very pivotal functionality and will become very useful in the future for not just organizing your application, but exporting, importing, deleting, managing it as well, and just having a real great way to target things. So you can click on these and change the namespace. You'll see now that's in default. I can come and say, this was in administration. And then, like I said, you can filter, search on them. Entities has them, workflows has them. If I create one here, it's available in the other place. Only caveat at the moment, as you look at tokens, they're not in here. These namespaces predate this new way of doing namespaces. We'll have a quick follow-up action once this is released to kind of automatically bring these under the fold. So if you've already got namespaces and things in your tokens, then they will be exposed and accessible in your workflows and entities as well. Any questions, comments on the namespaces before I move on?
Just one from me, that just making sure I understand, the namespace is not relative to how you might call that thing. If you create, yeah.
Not at all. It's
done by the singular name. Namespaces is just a grouping mechanism.
Yeah, currently they're only exposed and utilized in the app builder. When you go to leverage them or any of the workflows you've made currently, nothing will change. No functionality of the usage of your workflows, of your entities are impacted at all. So everything just works. And this is currently more for you to organize and find and work with, better group and organize your work.
I can sure see the value. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Like I said, these are sortable and things. One of the, someone had an idea I thought was really great, that, and looking for feedback as you all get your hands on this, that maybe a kind of a fast path. So you can see, like, maybe if I was sorted like this, these are mixed in. And I've got to come and click to filter. What if when I click on any one of these, if I just click the button, it auto instantly applies the filter. And then maybe having a pencil to edit. So this edits the workflow, maybe following the pattern with a little pencil here if you actually wanted to work with changing or assigning it, and having this be like a quick filter type thing. So open to that, just mainly wanted to get the functionality out. I think, like I said, I think this will help people a lot, and helps you think. You just, even just for me, the act of putting this together really made me think about, what are these? Where do they go? What do they do? How should I break them up and stuff? It just gives you a new dimension there. Okay, so we're going to say that namespace is done. We'll see our dashboard update. So the next one, this one's let's go into the PowerShell one. So this PowerShell, first thing I'll show you, if you're not familiar, PowerShell is a kind of a Windows, Microsoft kind of a scripting language, and it normally runs server side. And normally, in order to do things with PowerShell, you would have to be signed on or have access to the server in which your application is running. Now, once you have that access, it's like a command line type interface, and you can do all kinds of things. Like I know that I've talked with some folks and things along the way, and they're doing things where they're kind of managing provisioning of spinning up like little portals and creating pages, doing a lot of things, but needing to get access to put entries into IIS or read what's in there, look at disk files, see if folder structures are there, create folder structures. Now, we have some actions that do this stuff, but they're kind of limited and scoped down to within the space you're working in your application. And so the topic of PowerShell is probably too big to get into here, but and we can make this one is a great one for example, but you can see, I mean, there's a ton you can do, a lot of great examples, and things like, everything from your security and modifying your disk structure, recycling your app pools, so you can have things if the system's running slow, I want to recycle my app automatically or restart the app pool, different things like that. But there's other ones that are just. Mm-hmm.
I posted that link on the chat if anybody wants to see that article you're looking at.
Excellent, thank you. And you also get some other just handy functions, converting things to XML, to HTML, and so stuff that you might have to write Reza for or make JavaScript for. These are like little one and done commands, and kind of like if Unix, they support a piping syntax. So you can take one action, it does something, and its output can be fed into a next action and a next action. So you can chain them together. Now, with that said, I've got a couple of workflows that I've done that are calling the PowerShell. Let's take a look here. So what I've done is I made one that is looking at my resource utilization, CPU and memory utilization of this site right here, and the server that it's running on. And I also, just for giggles, said, hey, what services are running? There's all kinds of logging and things that's taking place in IIS, the web hosting environment, that you are not getting access to in these logs here, right? So you might have things that are going on, sites running slow, and you're going, I don't have any errors. I don't have any, none of this stuff is telling me anything's wrong, right? Because it's happening on the server and it's being logged on the server. Those logs and things are accessible as well if you can run PowerShell. So let me just kind of show the finished product here. And in the spirit, by the way, of our namespaces, I also created kind of an administration page, and I've put some of this stuff underneath here. And so, you can also do things like, just back to that namespace thing, you might have a namespace that's for utilities or lookups, or in my case here, administrative type things. And I went ahead and said, hey, since I'm namespacing my workflows and my entities and things that have to do with that, under administration, I might as well make a page and put these entities under there as well. So again, it's just giving me a chance to organize. So we'll look at this. This is just a real simple page with a, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so everything fits. And this page is basically, every time I refresh, you'll see that it's telling me what's my CPU utilization and what's my memory utilization. And you can see every time I refresh, it's taking a fresh read. Sometimes it dips up and down, but I've been running around 85, 86%. Now that's probably just fine, right? Kind of in the old days, you wanted to be real careful with memory utilization. These days, the technology is meant to utilize as much as the memory as possible without it, but eventually it will become a hit, maybe when it's 95, 96%. Now, all I'm doing is writing it out on the screen here. And also I went ahead and just took a quick dump. And so I'm running a command that is getting me running services on the server. Anything that's running on this server right now, actually in a state of running. So you can see here it says running. It's not the prettiest format at the moment, but I just was getting something quick going. So I can see what's running. I could also see services that are stopped. I could keep track of services that are supposed to be running, and if they stop, I want to be notified. You can take this or restart them automatically. There's a lot you can do here, but just wanted to kind of show. So how am I doing this? This is basically just a form that's calling a workflow or two. It's got a couple of static texts on it, one for the CPU, the memory, and then just that dump of running resources. And you can see I'm just calling a workflow here that's executing running services and then taking the output of it and injecting it into these fields here. So whenever the form loads, it does that. Another little thing that I added on is that we've got just a little bit of logging turned on. And so every time this PowerShell workflow is run and it's getting a read of CPU and memory, or it's getting the running services, I didn't want to dump that massive thing here in the payload. So I just said, hey, Reza was the person that ran this workflow, right? And so it's logging this for me. Reason I kind of showed this, and it was a precursor to, I could be putting in and now, you know, into an entity, I have a page, that's great, but I could make an entity and I could run this workflow and say, hey, put in my memory utilization. And then I have a scheduled thing that's running, an automation that's going, hey, go take a read and find me any instances where memory utilization is above 95%, or the count of that in 5-minute period is more than 3 times. Maybe it spiked for a minute, I don't want false alarms. And now do something, alert me, notify me, text me, send an email, take corrective action to recycle something or to kill running processes, right? But I can be monitoring my site and notifying myself. And in this case, all I'm doing is writing it out so we could see what's happening. But the idea is I can be taking what's coming from this PowerShell and I can be logging it, and then I can monitor my logs, right? And if I see patterns or strange behaviors or things, I can take action. And so let's see.
And yeah, can you show us what that PowerShell looks like?
Absolutely. So I have a couple of these. We'll take a look at the resource utilization one first. And you'll see that it's really, I could have done this as one, but I just wanted to keep it simple. So I've got two, there's a new action, and it's called run PowerShell script. So you'll see that just like any other action. If you type PowerShell, you have it. And it's real simple. It says, what do you want to run PowerShell wise? It gives you some examples. It has a link over to some example, you know, similar to that page I showed, but a better documentation one from Microsoft that explains PowerShell and things to you, and just a caveat that you can use tokens here. And so it's just a scripting language. Don't be intimidated by it. I don't know it, didn't know anything about it. Literally half an hour before I'm demoing this to you, I went and hit that page and just played with copy pasting different PowerShell things. So the ones that are getting and reading things, you know, like, okay, obviously, again, that caveat is you can do damage just like you could with a run SQL action or with a JavaScript action or anything, right? You need to really kind of think about what you're doing, especially when you're making changes. Reads usually are okay, but you know, you want to make sure you're not running this thing 1,000 times in a row and it puts a lot of strain on your system or something. So usually when you're out reading and learning about these things, there's warnings and they'll tell you things, and test them out. Always, my recommendation is put them in workflows. And so it's going to take whatever the script does. So in this case, this is their variable language, is a $sign. So we called something $sign processor. And then we're just using this get object. You give it a computer name and Win32 processes. And it's just going and saying measure properties. I could measure a lot of things, and it's getting the load that's on the CPU at the moment and taking, in this case, an average of it. So, and you notice the little pipes, each one, these are separate commands, and it says, go get this, go feed it into this next one that's going to do an average, and then feed that back out here. And then just like you would in Reza or JavaScript or anything else, since I'm saying I set my variable to this, now output my variable, just write it. And this can do a lot of things in here, right? And so this is saying, okay, what do you want the result of this to be? I just called it CPU as a token. I have another one here that's doing memory utilization, and it's just kind of rounding up. And again, these are real basic things that you can find out on these sites. And then I return it back as the kind of rounded memory, and I call it memory. So my token just executes these two actions. I also made a little workflow for myself, just kind of so I could show namespaces. This is the thing that's just writing to the logger. And I went ahead and just logged that this happened, right? That I actually accessed and read the system memory and who did it and stuff like that. But all I actually output then is the CPU and memory. Similarly, there's another one, and might as well use my filter here, make this a little simpler. So now I've got running services. It's just a run PowerShell script action. Now this one's a little bit better to show you. So there's the actual command. If I just did get service, it would get me all running services. That's all, literally all you have to do is get service. And it's going to go say, here's everything that's running on this machine. But then I went ahead, I piped it into like this little filter, and because it's got a lot of properties it brings back. One of those is a status. And I said, where status equals running. I could have called this stopped, and it's just going to show me stopped services, right? So I took the list of all services. I used this pipe to feed it into this little filter. Now I've got a filtered list of services. And the last little thing I do is I feed it to this little command called convert to HTML. So you could do a PowerShell workflow action that anything you give it, if you just run this little convert or feed whatever your variable is, an input parameter, anything from another workflow, and you were just to do this convert to -HTML, it'll take anything you give it and convert it to HTML. And then I outputted it here as just PS for PowerShell. And so what I end up getting is an HTML of all the running services. So if we run over here, that's because I took those services. If I had not turned it in HTML, it's just a big wall of text. All of this is mumbled together. Because I fed it through that convert to HTML, it turns it into an HTML table for me. So super handy. In the interest of time, the last two are kind of quicker to show. So let's, while we're kind of here, I'm gonna show you one. I won't go back to my task. So we have one, you'll notice here I've got this is green, right? And how did I do this green? Well, I did a little CSS override. If we just run back to our form, you'll notice on this CPU and on the memory, I went ahead and I put a couple of classes. I just called them resources, right? This was just an example of showing you, well, now that I have a CSS class for these, doesn't mean anything's going to happen, right? Now I could write my own HTML. I can be inspecting things that Action Form or Action Grid is giving me back. There's a lot of CSS happening and a lot of neat things I can do with CSS. In this case, I just classed these, and I want to go ahead now and say I want these to be green. And I only want that to happen on this page. So there's a new thing now under UI settings. We'll zoom back in a little bit. You have portal CSS. So you used to just have these colors you managed, but you have portal CSS and page CSS. In this case, on this page only, remember I made a class, I classed these resources. And so I basically said, I want anything that has a class of resources color to be green. Now this is only each page. It has its own now CSS file in your app, and you can manage it from right here. So I could make this page look, feel, act, or have things that are totally different than the rest of the pages on my site. Why I would put something on the page only is like maybe nothing else in my app is using this resources thing. It's just for this page. Why pay the hit everywhere on every page of loading up this CSS? So there's a time to just override at the page level. But another example, if you just hit save changes and refresh your page, this would get picked up. So for example, I could come here and just call this. So now I'm red. But there's also times where I want to override everything site-wide. For example, the font size of my menu. And as we've seen, I have a big screen, high resolution. This site doesn't have a very big menu. So what if I wanted my font size of my menu to be bigger? And one of the things I'm doing right now is going through with our front-end developer, and we're going to go ahead and preload a handy set of starters for you. Nothing will be overridden, but it's going to say, hey, if you want to change your font size for all body paragraph type stuff, if you want to change the menu font size, if you want to change, here's a list of things, your overall kind of spacing of your site, and we'll get you kind of a boost and a help point you to some things that are probably handy and are going to be common unless you're doing something. I mean, you can do anything you want, but this one, for example, is something I could see people wanting and not having to go and figure out, how do I do this? Where is it? So I've basically said that I want to make, and now you'll notice, I'm going to kind of zoom back out a little bit here. You'll notice the font size of my menu got really bigger, right? From what it was. And that is applied everywhere now, right? Any page I'm on, is holding that. And that's because I modified this portal CSS. So this is universal, site-wide type things. Make it even bigger, just so we can see it for effect. I can say, okay, well, that's maybe too big. Now you can do things, and again, whole other topic for another time, but I could do things where I target and say, hey, on really big, large screens with high resolution, I want it to be this big. On smaller screens, I actually want it to be smaller so more fits in or something, right? You can do all of that with CSS. All Googleable type things, use your Google foo. The key though is that you have that now accessible to you in Page Builder. So we've taken a look at the PowerShell and the CSS. The last one I'll show, and I'll just show it very, very, very briefly because we don't have a lot of time, is this one for working with Google Sheets. And you'll see here that I've got a Google Sheet set up. And what I was going to do here is similar to what Radu did. I've got these tasks, and maybe I want to have a one-way sync, two-way sync, whatever, but I don't want people working in my application. I've got, for whatever reason, a spreadsheet that I want to import to be my tasks, right? And I need a way to access it. And so there is now an action. So in this workflow here, it's called Authorize Google. And there's a Get Google Authorization Bearer Token. So back in a little bit now. So that's what this is called. And you basically have a new connector type that you'll set up in here. And you just add a new group. When you do, I called it Google, and it's going to want your credentials. And I just called it Google Auth, and there's a service account JSON. And where you access this from, and we'll make a video up on this one. This is nothing in some documentation. It's actually really easy to do when you follow the instructions, but you don't be overwhelmed here. But you basically just create a new service account. You name it. I called this one Low Code Cafe Demo. It gives me this email and a unique, so I have an account, and I can basically go to any spreadsheet or asset of Google. Sorry, this thing got in my way. And in my sharing, where Radu in the past, he was saying, hey, anyone who has this link can see it. But now I've said, no, 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 only people I've shared with. And you just share with that email address that it gave you. And I've said that can be an editor. So because I gave that service, I created a service account, I gave it access to my sheet, and I have a connector, I can work with 50 spreadsheets now that I want, that this service account has access to. And all I'm doing here is putting this in, this action runs, and its net result is, and there's some scopes. So in this case, I've said I want to work with spreadsheets. I'm authorizing spreadsheets. I could have done it for the documents, for anything. So you set up your connector, tell this particular one that it works with sheets, and it gives me an output token. And if you see save and test here, all it's giving me is some big long string. It expires. Google's managing it all. And now if we run over here to this other workflow I have for read task spreadsheet. So you see I call the authorize Google. I get my bearer token, and then I make a API request to the sheet, the path of the spreadsheet in question. It's my task list one. And all I have to do is add just an authorization header. And I say bearer equals, and it's the token that came from the other one. So that's it. It's one action to get a bearer token. The other is make a simple server request. And in this case, you'll see I am reading. So you can see the rows and values. It's giving me JSON. So my next step, if I wanted, would be to parse this JSON, go see if these entries exist, add them to my task manager, whatever I want to do. You can see I've got like install, update, demo, new feature. I'll just run over here and change this one to be finish demo, run back to my workflow, run it again, and now you see finish demo, right? So I'm reading securely raw right off of that sheet. If I didn't have my bearer token, that would basically fail. So the only reason it's working for me, if I went and called this just something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we tried to save and test this, I'm going to get an error back, and it's going to say invalid credentials. It expected OAuth access tokens. So see, so now I can lock these down but make it very easy. So someone sets up a workflow to get bearer tokens, right? Once you have that, though, you don't need to know about any of that. You don't need to set that up over and over and jump through all those hoops that Radu did when he was demoing this a few weeks ago. Now someone else can come along, or you, and just make use of it very easily. So had we had more time, I could have created a new sheet and just given shared access to this same user, and I'd be in business reading and working with that one too. So we're at time. Had a lot to show.
Absolutely. I think there was one quick question back on namespaces, and it was about are namespaces applying on automation scheduler jobs?
No, not yet. So that's the kind of stuff I want to hear. Wanted to really start with workflows and entities, getting tokens in line since they're already there, and I don't want to let too much time go and us drift off from that. So we'll circle back on tokens, but that's if folks think that's helpful, I think it's a great idea. So we're saying there's a lot of jobs that can build up in here, and if we wanted to have namespaces and kind of basically the ability to group the jobs and filter and search them, right?
And the question also had to do a little bit with pages. So what you've started to do already with like with your app, your setting up the pages to match the namespace, there might be some ideas or thoughts about doing that. But it's a great start, and I think we're in position to take it to the next level.
Indeed. Yeah. All right, thanks everyone, and follow up, any feedback, reach out. Fill out the comments thing if there's anything you saw or want to see more of, or have an idea for how it should work, maybe different, better. I'd love to hear that.
And probably the question here is when and how do people can people get 114 now?
Yep. So the release candidate will be next week, and several of the folks that are on right now I know are in that program. And so I'll make that available there. We can kind of get a little bit of user testing. Will be next week. And then things will release the following week, early the following week. So just kind of code freeze Friday, testing and release candidate, final UAT testing next week. We just like to let things bake in our own, we eat our own dog food. All our sites will get it. Everything's running well, then we'll roll it out to everyone else.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is a very nice release, very useful features that we postponed for quite a while, but I think I'm happy to see that we are finally there. Feedback is good. So looking forward to seeing you next week and continue sharing great content with you. There is a feedback form that I think they'll post it in the chat. So please help us by giving us the right feedback that helps us get better content for you in place. So thanks for being here, and see you again next week.